outrage over allegations of widespread fraud of taxpayer dollars in the state of Minnesota. A viral
6:42 a.m., St. Paul, Minnesota. The city was frozen in silence. Exhaust smoke drifted slowly into the pale winter sky as three unmarked federal SUVs idled outside what appeared to be a licensed childcare center. On paper, it was thriving. More than 800 children enrolled daily. Subsidies arrived like clockwork. Millions flowed through its accounts every month. But something felt wrong. When federal inspectors stepped out into the cold, they weren't responding to a robbery or violent crime. This was labeled a routine compliance inspection, yet the team included forensic accountants, cybercrime analysts, and federal agents. The front door opened. Inside, the building was spotless, too spotless. Toys aligned perfectly on shelves, cribs neatly arranged, attendance sheets fully completed in blue ink, every name accounted for. But there were no children, no drawings on the walls, no scuffed floors, no scent of breakfast, no warmth. Dust coated untouched surfaces, the silence pressed against the walls. This single facility had received tens of millions in taxpayer funds over the past year alone. State records showed 5 related centers operating under similar enrollment numbers. Together, they had drawn billions over several years. Yet on this morning, not a single child was present. What began as an inspection was quickly transforming into something much larger, because the numbers didn't just look inflated, they looked engineered. And somewhere behind those perfectly filed documents was a system that had learned how to exploit compassion at industrial scale.
The Somalians have taken over the economics of the state and have stolen billions and billions of dollars.
Inside the director's office, investigators uncovered the first fracture in the illusion. A massive enrollment binder sat on the desk, hundreds upon hundreds of names, birth dates, social security numbers, emergency contacts. Everything appeared authentic, until analysts began cross-checking. Many identities were linked to inactive records. Some numbers belonged to deceased individuals. Others had never existed at all. They weren't careless mistakes. They were constructed identities. An entire population of ghost children had been created. Digital lives built only to trigger government payments. Investigators traced the funding pattern. Money moved rapidly, deposited, divided, transferred through dozens of intermediary accounts. In some months, reimbursements exceeded $70 million, yet less than 5% could be linked to legitimate expenses like food, payroll, or rent. No bulk food contracts, no employee tax filings, no insurance claims consistent with 800 children per facility. Instead, large wire transfers moved overseas, always just under federal reporting thresholds. Someone understood the system deeply. This wasn't opportunistic fraud. It was structured, automated, scalable. Federal authorities confirmed that similar patterns were emerging across multiple centers statewide. What appeared to be isolated compliance issues were revealing themselves as nodes in a network. The numbers were staggering. And for every dollar misused, real families struggled to find affordable childcare. By afternoon, the investigation had shifted from audit to criminal inquiry, because this wasn't just paperwork manipulation, it was financial architecture built on fabricated lives.
The administration says it is now withholding all federal child care funding to the entire state.
The deeper investigators dug, the more sophisticated the deception became. Digital files revealed something chilling, a schedule labeled simulation shifts. It detailed timed vehicle movements in parking lots during inspection windows, temporary staff hired to create activity, outdoor speakers hidden in landscaping that played recorded sounds of children laughing. A performance, a stage set designed for regulators. Inspectors had been shown motion, noise, paperwork, just enough to satisfy a checklist, but no real daily operation existed. Security footage confirmed that during most operating hours, buildings remained empty. Meanwhile, money continued flowing uninterrupted. The network had mastered appearance. Forms were flawless, reports were punctual, compliance responses were immediate. The system had mistaken repetition for legitimacy. As forensic teams expanded the probe, they uncovered links between multiple facilities, sharing administrators, mailing addresses, and financial officers. Some individuals were listed as managing multiple sites simultaneously, physically impossible under state guidelines. And still, payments had continued for years. By nightfall, federal prosecutors authorized coordinated search warrants across all affiliated properties. This was no longer an administrative failure. It was organized financial crime. But investigators were about to discover that the missing money hadn't simply disappeared. It had been redirected into something far more dangerous.
Fresh outrage over allegations of widespread fraud of taxpayer dollars in the state of Minnesota. A viral
2:18 a.m. Data analysts tracking financial transfers identified an industrial property 30 miles outside the city, officially listed as inactive. But utility records told another story. Electricity usage surged nightly. Water consumption was abnormally high. Security systems operated continuously. When tactical teams arrived before dawn, the building looked abandoned. It wasn't. Inside, agents discovered a covert chemical processing operation funded through laundered subsidy payments. Detailed ledgers showed massive purchases of industrial precursor materials. The funds siphoned from childcare programs had been converted into infrastructure, machinery, chemical supply chains, distribution logistics. This wasn't random reinvestment, it was money laundering on an industrial scale. Further inside, agents located dozens of individuals being forced to work under inhumane conditions. Some had been reported missing months earlier. Medical teams were deployed immediately. The fraud had evolved into something darker, a criminal enterprise that had used a welfare program as a financial engine. By sunrise, the facility was secured, accounts were frozen, arrest warrants issued. But the damage extended far beyond financial loss. Communities had lost childcare access. Legitimate providers had closed, unable to compete with artificially inflated operations. The human cost was measurable and devastating.
Tim Walz needs to be held accountable. Everybody in his administration needs to be held
By
accountable.
10:26 a.m., federal officials began formal briefings. Preliminary estimates placed taxpayer losses in the billions. Tens of thousands of families had been indirectly affected as legitimate funding pools were drained. Licensed childcare capacity had dropped in several neighborhoods. Real providers, those paying staff, feeding children, maintaining safe spaces, couldn't survive against phantom competitors. The system had prioritized speed over verification, automation over oversight, trust over audit. The fraud ring hadn't hidden in darkness, it hid in plain sight, behind complete paperwork, clean facilities, and procedural compliance. The lesson was uncomfortable. When oversight becomes routine, repetition looks like reliability. When compassion becomes automated, exploitation becomes scalable. The investigation remains ongoing. Charges are being filed, assets are being seized, but the larger question remains: how many systems designed to help the vulnerable are vulnerable themselves? This case isn't about one facility, it's about accountability. Because when public trust is abused, the consequences ripple far beyond spreadsheets, and the real victims are the families who needed help and never received it.